Welcome to another episode of the Giants Huddle Podcast, brought to you by PSEG, energy efficiency for game time and anytime. Visit PSEG.com/Giants for discounts, rebates, and home energy assessments. If you watch the Giants Huddle or Big Blue Kickoff Live, you recognize the guy on the other side of this Zoom, and he is Eric Edholm, formerly of Yahoo Sports Now. He is the lead draft writer for NFL.com/NFL Media, and he found some time in his busy schedule to join us to talk some draft right here on the Giants Huddle Podcast. Eric, man, usually we catch up at the Combine, and we did see each other. We hung up, we chatted. We just couldn't figure out a time to do it, but this is good. Now I get all your more, close to the draft nuggets that you've been kind of digging up over the past few weeks.
Yeah, I warned you and about 19 other people. I said, I want to do the show. This being my first Combine with NFL Media, let me kind of see how things go. And it was steady. It was pretty busy the whole time. It was the same basic sort of concept as what I did for Yahoo, but a few other little things along the way. So yeah, I'm more than happy to pop on now and make it up to you.
Nah, dude, you don't owe us anything. We appreciate your time. And Eric is one of the guys that's always locked in at least one podium during each session, sometimes two or three. So we know he does all the work. So let's go to your most recent mock draft, Eric. It was last week. I'm sure you're going to have at least two more coming before the draft shows up, which I'm sure you're very excited about doing. But in the one you did last week, you had Zay Flowers going to the Giants at number 25. So let's take that as a launching off point. Are you really leaning wide receiver for the Giants at 25? You just put up a top needs for each team article this week as well. Yeah. Is that where you're looking? Is there another position that maybe you think is more of a need? How do you see that in terms of the Giants, in terms of needs?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't, when you go down to the Senior Bowl and eventually to the Combine, obviously you're talking to a lot of different people, and even secondhand, you can get some interesting information at times. And the word seemed to be that the Giants were on the lookout for a receiver. Now, that doesn't necessarily lock them in, of course, to a round one selection, but it was partly need, and especially given the way last year went, obviously arrow pointing up, have to be encouraged about most of the band so far being back together. And, it's tempting to kind of go with, boy, if we had a speed guy in the playoffs, what might have happened? Or if we add somebody with a little bit of juice to this team, what can we do? And, it's just sort of interesting. Obviously, Waller helps, but you'd love somebody to stretch the field. But in this case, if I recall, the way the board kind of fell, receiver made a lot of sense given what was available.
Yeah, absolutely. And, just to take a look real quick at what happened on your board here in this draft, you had Zay Flowers to the Giants at 25. Quentin Johnson went 22 to the Baltimore Ravens. He, I believe, was the second receiver off the board. The first receiver off the board was Jackson Smith-Njigba at 16 to the Chargers, and you had one other receiver go in the first round. You had Jordan Addison to the Bills at 27. So let's take availability out of the mix for a second. Let's just talk pure, if the Giants could, wave their magic wand, cast their wish. Given what the Giants have at receiver right now, which, quite frankly, I'll just be honest with you, a bunch of guys that want to play the slot between Wan'Dale Robinson, Sterling Shepard, Paris Campbell, Jameson Crowder. That's a lot of slot guys. If you try to fit these guys, even rank them 1 through 4 if you want, an ideal fit for the Giants at 25, if you were them, who would you be going after?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Obviously, they need speed. And when you take a player like Flowers, like I did in my mock, it is a bit of a risk in the sense that some people are projecting him inside. And you just laid out the case for why that there may be better options at that position. So Quentin Johnson does check a lot of boxes off. I'll be honest, I like him. I don't know that I love him, but I think he's a really good player. I think
I'm with you on that, by the way. Dude, he's a weird prospect, right? He's tall and he's thin. He's not great at contested catches, but a tall, thin guy that's great after the catch, it's weird.
Yeah.
It's weird.
It is. He's got some juice. He definitely does. Like, you saw them, the signature play from the win over the Michigan in the was it the Fiesta Bowl or whatever, the semifinals. There was that little kind of swing pass where he kind of, orbited around in the backfield and beat DJ Turner, Mr. 4.26 40-yard dash guy at the Combine, beat him to the edge and ripped off an incredible play. That's maybe the best way to use him. I mean, obviously the jump ball stuff with his size and his length, you like the idea of it, but as you pointed out, sometimes the timing, sometimes, winning the physical battle. But if you use them the right way, and I have no doubts that Brian Daboll and Mike Kafka and everybody else in that building would have a pretty good feel for that. You might have a darn good weapon. Is he a one? Not in my opinion. So you'd have to kind of set the expectations properly. But yeah, I mean, it's just a weird year for draft too. I mean, for receivers this year in the draft. So I don't know that there's very few guys his size too. So that's another reason why you may go that direction if he's available.
No, look, I'm with you 100%. And you said he's not a one. I'll be honest with you, Eric. I don't know if there is a one in this draft. Look, someone's going to emerge and be a one.
Yeah.
It's just the way it goes. And I think maybe Jackson Smith-Njigba could be that guy, given his change of direction and his production in college and all that stuff. And we know what Ohio State just churns out really good wide receivers. So maybe him, but would it shock me if like the first 4 or 5 wideouts taken in this draft, none of them turned into a true one? That wouldn't surprise me, to be honest with you.
On the Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson spectrum, no, I don't think anybody. The closest who could potentially get there, you mentioned Smith-Njigba. You know, we didn't really see him last year. He barely played, and the injury thing, it bit him. I was a little surprised he came out, but not shocked, obviously, given his talent. As you know, he's a top 12 prospect for me. I really like him, and I think he's a very good football player. I like him more than maybe some other people do. I don't look at a ton of mocks. I don't like being kind of biased, but it just from what I've been able to gather, I think more people have him closer to the 20s than I do. But he's the one with a chance, and he's an unusual receiver too. And I think he can be a slot, he can be an outside, he could be a possession guy, but also a yards after the catch guy. So yeah, maybe not elite fast and elite speed, size, but I think he's got everything else that it takes to be really good.
So when you talk to people and you ask them, is this an outside guy or a slot guy? You talk to scouts and you do your own evaluation, especially with a guy like Flowers, who's not as tall. How can you figure out if that guy can play outside or not? Because literally, I think it's split down the middle. I think half the people I've talked to already, he can play outside. Other people, he isn't long enough. He doesn't have a big enough wingspan. His catch radius isn't good enough. I don't think he can play outside. So how do you kind of make that determination whether or not you think, especially some of these smaller guys, can do more than just play the slot in the NFL?
Yeah, I mean, can they get off a press coverage on the outside, right? That's going to be, especially for a smaller guy, like can Zay Flowers go up against a Jalen Ramsey, let's say, right? A long arm corner who, has all the tricks in the book, and that's kind of his thing. That's a tough sell. Is he become a slot guy? Is he a motion man? How is that how you, or do you just sort of let him work through it? That kind of thing. Well, plus what experience do they have? And you can kind of look to see, it's not easy to find a ton of press coverage reps in college football, as you know, but they're there. I mean, you see them once in a while, but it's not like the NFL, obviously. So it's tough for the league and the scouts because they want to find corners who can press and receivers who can get out of press. And, you're having to look at traits, like you said, the arm length, the quickness, how quickly can you kind of sink your hips and get the body position and to get that first quick step. So it's part of it, I think. And obviously you have to have a little bit of separation ability too. It's a lot easier when you have two-way goes underneath versus the outside, where you often have a sideline on one side and then the field to the inside or whatever. So it depends on the prospect. Not every small guy is doomed to a life in the slot, or destined to a life in the slot, I suppose. And not every big guy. You often see these bigger slots these days, and it's sometimes for, almost playing them like an H-back sometimes.
No, 100%. And I think that's going to be one of the challenges here with this class, Eric. Let's say the Giants don't go wide out in round 1, right?
Yep.
You go deep with your prep. Who are some of the guys you like on day 2? Heck, maybe you don't even pick one on day 2. Maybe you want to say, round 4, I feel good about, drafting Landers or something like that. Who are some of the guys that you like on day 2 or day 3 that you think some people might be underrating that can help an NFL team in the next year or so?
At receiver or at any position?
Receiver.
Okay. Yeah. Some day 2 guys that I know have some fans around the league, different teams and whatnot. I mean, Tyler Scott from Cincinnati, again, kind of more of the same sort of body type that we've described with Jordan Addison and Zay Flowers. And a lot of these guys are very similar, kind of that 5'9", 180 pounds or fewer. Scott is fast, but I mean, he could be your vertical threat. I've seen him catch plenty of balls where, he's almost got a little Tyler Lockett to him. We wonder whether Lockett could survive as an outside receiver in the league. He's a great example of a guy who can move in and out and, run those over routes and go routes. So he's one of those. Marvin Mims Jr. from Oklahoma is one who I probably didn't respect quite enough during the season. And then because Oklahoma's year kind of, went off the rails a little bit and some inconsistent quarterbacking and then this and that. And all of a sudden you go back and watch him and say, this guy's pretty good, man. I mean, he's got a lot of different skills, a lot of sort of tricks in his bag to spring big plays. So Jonathan Mingo is another one who's more of one of the few bigger bodied type. I call him a Green Bay Packers receiver because that's sort of the type that they look for, but he would apply to, the other 31 teams just as easily, and a real physical specimen who I think is just starting to kind of scratch the surface of what he can do. I think all those guys I mentioned are going to be very healthily within the day 2 range.
Do you sense that Jordan Addison is slipping? Because that seems to be what the momentum is. And I always wonder about things like this. If it's just a media creation, if there's actually is a kernel of truth to it from where it started to where it's gotten. People say, his combine testing was bad. His combine testing was fine. His athletics was fine. His weight, I could see that being a problem for people, right? 173. What's your sense on Addison? Is he for you? Do you think he's definitely the third guy off? Could he move up ahead of Flowers or Johnson, or the fourth guy, I should say? What's the sense on Jordan Addison right now?
Really good players, but as you mentioned, there are some people who were very concerned to see him show up with small hands. The height's fine. I don't 5'11" or whatever.
Yeah,
that's great.
Fine.
But yeah, I mean, now we're talking about a second year in a row, or second and third year, where Devontae Smith was the guy who we said was painfully skinny, a little bit on the longer side. Addison's a little shorter, but he's, not too much heavier. He's only about 10 pounds heavier than Devontae Smith. Well, Smith's made it work, but this is a guy who's got some special ability to get off the line. I think Addison's craftiness is going to really serve him well. And I do think inside he'll probably have a lot more success early in his career. He's got enough wherewithal, I think, to make it work outside later in his career, but it may take a little time, right, to face up against some of those bigger corners. But the problem is when you're 173 pounds and you run let's face it, a 4.5 was like a 4.48, 4.49. I want to say he ran. That's the problem is if he was that size and he ran Deshaun Jackson times, no problem. We can use that. Right. But when you're not quite as fast, it's a great 40 by normal human standards, but by 173 pounder standards, it's a little worrisome. So I think day 2 is not out of the question. I had him going 27. So yeah, I mean, it could happen.
Yeah, I think Tank Dell's in that conversation too, right? He's
same idea.
And then his 40 looked really fast, but then it came up. I think he was like a 4.47 also. I think, whenever the shorter guys and their legs go really fast when they're running, it's the old Tom Cruise effect. It looks like they're running a lot faster than they actually are.
Yeah, or either that or it's like a blur. You don't actually see anything moving. But you're right. I thought about that with Dell. I thought he would maybe touch the high 3.8s, low 4.4s, and it just wasn't quite as good as I thought. But his game speed makes up for it. I'm not in love with him the way some people are, but it's hard not to be infatuated with some of his skill set.
Yeah, good player. All right, let's go to corner, because I imagine that's probably one of the other needs you talked about, right? Unfortunately, in your mock, if I recall, and I'll take a look at it right now as we have this conversation, the top 4 corners were all off the board when you got to the Giants at 25. Yep. Yeah, I know you're not very nice, but that's okay. Deontay Banks was the 4th guy at 21 to Washington. Joey Porter Jr. went to the Steelers at 17, and then of course you had Devin Witherspoon to the Patriots at 14. Yes. And then no surprise, Gonzalez was your first cornerback off the board. I'm trying to find his landing spot. There we go, number 6 to the Lions. So let me ask you this. I feel very confident in saying, and you can shake your head and yell at me if I'm wrong, Giant fans should not be thinking about Witherspoon, Gonzalez, or Porter, correct? Like, that's just not happening?
Probably not. I will say this, though. Devin Witherspoon, we were talking about with Jordan Addison, like the lack of weight, bulk mass, and not running a great 40. There are some people in the scouting community who are worried about what Devin Witherspoon would run in a 40-yard dash. They worry about
his... Run one.
He's not going to run one. At this point, the hay's in the barn, as they say, right? And his tape is outstanding. He's so aggressive. He's so physical. He's so tough. I mean, he's got instincts for days. But, there were a few times where guy would get a step on him a little bit, and you noticed it. Maybe the ball didn't even go their way, but you worried about. I think some guys might be able to stress him in a man system. So
he doesn't have that makeup speed that some of the other guys do.
That's it. So that's the one who I think, boy, there's a lot of fans of his around the league, but if they get skittish about a smaller corner who hasn't run, you don't have a time on him, he might be there, but I would say more likely all three could be gone. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Deonte Banks is a great fit, man. The way they use him in press in Maryland, I think if he gets there, I think if they're sitting there and they're looking at, Deonte Banks against Zay Flowers and Jordan Addison, and they've, even if two of those three guys are there, I think that's a really, really tough decision, because I think Banks, based on what he did and his size and his numbers and what the Giants' needs are, I don't know about you. I think that would just be a perfect fit.
Yeah, it's tricky. I mean, this year, we've been so blessed with wide receiver talent in the draft the last really 4 or 5 years, whatever it's been. And every year, what's the strength of the draft? Felt like receiver was your go-to answer almost every year. This year, not quite as strong, but corner is. So it's a tough gamble to take if you're a GM and you're staring at those two positions, let's say, and at the end of round one there, and you're thinking, boy, maybe we could swing something in round two here. Maybe one of these guys at the other position falls, but those are two pretty high priority positions. Corner is usually thinner than receiver. This year, I'm not so sure though. Yeah, it's a tough risk it would almost go against your natural instinct to say, let's get the corner now. We could find a receiver on day two. Maybe you can, maybe you can't, so it's just going to be a little thinner than most years, but maybe a little, a little bulkier at corner this year. So I don't know if that sways their decision or not. It's just one of those things to think about, but Banks is a really good player for sure. And I'm a little shocked that he hasn't gotten more attention at this point. I think he looks the part, and outside of I think it was a shoulder injury a couple years ago. I mean, he's a pretty clean looking prospect in a lot of ways.
Do you have a pretty big drop-off after those first four when you start getting to Cam Smith and Emmanuel Forbes, speaking of freakishly thin?
Yeah.
Forbes, is a pretty good big drop-off there? Or I love his tape, by the way, but my God, the guy is, you could blow him over with, if you cough, it's rough.
Right. Yeah. And, some people say Brian Branch is more of a nickel corner than a true safety, and Turner, same thing. Maybe he's a nickel guy. And yeah, so you could kind of play with the positions. Keely Ringo might be a safety on some teams' boards, but Julius Brents would be in that mix for day two. And I think you're right. There is a drop. Could a fifth corner go in round one? It would not shock me if there was a little bit of a run early. We've seen much stranger things than that. Good example was when the Packers took Stokes from Georgia a couple years ago. Day two, kind of a prospect at the end of round one. It happens. So on my board, it's a little bit of a drop, but I wouldn't shame anybody for going that route if they loved Forbes or Brents or Cam Smith or one of those guys. Even Terrell Smith from Minnesota is a name to watch too. There's been some buzz on him as well. Yet.
Interesting.
Yep. And the other one, Jacorian Bennett, and a couple other guys have. Tyreek Stevenson from Miami. That's a name to file away. I wouldn't be shocked if he goes top 40, top 45, 50, something like that.
It's funny. You mentioned Julius Brents. I think, when I was out at the Senior Bowl, people were talking to him around 3, round 4. Then he played pretty well there. His testing, especially his agility numbers at 6'3" or 6'4", were ridiculous at the combine. And then, and this will be a bit of a tease, Bruce Feldman, who does his mock draft with comments from coaches and everything, in his little blurb on Brents, and we'll have Feldman on the huddle in the coming week or so, he said that don't be surprised if he even sneaks into the back end of round one. And as you know, no one's more locked in than Bruce talking to people around. He talks to college people who talk to the pro scouts when they come and talk to the college folks. So he's locked in there. So I wonder how high Brents might go here, given all his physical traits.
He's he's a 6'3" corner with 34-inch arms who could run. He ran roughly the same 40 as Jordan Addison. I want to say it was like a 4.5 and change or whatever. So, this is a kid who I think flew under the radar. Now he's a zone guy, in my opinion. Could you teach him press man? Yeah, I don't know that he's quite as physical as he probably needs to be, but he redirects pretty well off the line and all that. And the body control and the length are really what get people excited. So yeah, it wouldn't stun me. In fact, I I had somebody in media ask me, like, would it be crazy to put him in round 1? And I had to be like, well, yeah. And then I thought, you know what? It wouldn't be shocking. And so I've been thinking about it for a little over a week because of that conversation. But yeah, I think he's more likely a day 2 guy. But yeah, that wouldn't shock me.
Any sleeper corners that you think, and you mentioned Terrell Smith, that maybe you think people are not talking enough about?
Yeah, he's probably the one who's maybe most interesting. And yeah, I mentioned Tyreek Stevenson. I think people are excited, especially the teams that play a decent amount of man defense. I think are going to be interested in him. And the mystery guy would be Eli Ricks, I think, from Alabama via LSU. People remember his freshman year, who followed college football. He looked like, the next sort of star at the position. In fact, it almost follows a little bit of what we saw from I'm blanking on Stingley, who the Texans took last year, in that, some of his best tape was his freshman year. Does that concern you? Well, yeah, it does. But there's obviously a talented player in there who's played on 2 really competitive defenses. And whether you can kind of get the most out of him is the big question, but he's chock full of talent. There's no question.
All right, let's head over now to the other big giant need, which I think is center, Eric. And you only had one offensive guard going depending on what you think of Skoronski, we'll call him a tackle for this conversation. You only had one straight up guard go in the first round of your mock. That was Osiris Torrance. He was off the board before the Giants even picked. You did not have a center go, and we've started to see more of John Michael Schmidt slide into the first round. I think in Daniel Jeremiah's last mock, I think he had Tippmann even going to the Giants in round 1, if I recall properly. So your thoughts on those centers? Is this a philosophical thing for you, where you just don't think centers worth it in the first, or those guys not worth the bang for your buck? Give me a breakdown at the top of the center class here.
Yeah, sometimes general managers, especially those with obviously pro scouting experience, or maybe they have a background on that, they'll understand that, center is one of the lower ranked positions. If you were to make a totem pole or whatever, like a positional hierarchy, quarterback is at the top, and then you decide corner, left tackle, receiver, whatever, pass rusher. As it went down, you get, right guard, special teams, center would be in the bottom third of the positional value chart. So the highest I think we've seen a center go is about the 18th pick in recent years. In fact, actually, that may go back to like Damian Woody. I remember looking at this a couple years ago, but top 20 centers just don't happen very often. Where they can come is that back third of round 1, early part of round 2. For me, when I watched John Michael Schmitz, had a good Senior Bowl, nice college player, he just screamed round 2 to me. That was my impression of watching him. It was almost like, watching a 88% version of Creed Humphrey. Like he's almost that good, but not. And I
agree,
quite,
by the way. I don't think he's as good as Creed Humphrey was.
No, I can't go there. But I like him as a player. He could start for 8 years and be the captain of your line in time. Joe Tippmann is unusually tall for the position, but you don't notice it when you watch him. I mean, I don't feel like I sit there and go, oh, he's upright and he's going to get, cut down that way, and this is going to lose his leverage and all that stuff. I never noticed it. Like usually a guy's 6'6" with, I guess his arm length isn't special, but still usually that kind of a size guy, you tend to see more on the outside, but he gets a little wide with his hands and a little kind of loose with some of his pass pro stuff. But I think he's a really smart guy with all the ingredients to be a very strong, solid, rock solid center. So I go back and forth on those guys, and I can't quite decide which one I like more, but I might be leaning slightly Tippmann. I think it's close. They're both starting caliber centers who are probably just shy of Pro Bowl level at this, for the first couple of years of their career.
If you want a center, do you need to get one of those two guys, or is someone after those two that you trust enough? Do you like a Weipler? Do you think Steve Avila could move over? Who are some of the guys a little bit later on, maybe that you?
I think Avila is a better guard, but he has played center, as you pointed out. You could try in there. I don't think you get killed. I'll give you a sleeper at this position. Yeah, you mentioned Whippler from Ohio State. I think he's good. He's young. I think he still needs a little time. Cam Jurgens, who came out from Nebraska, he's like a slightly less athletic version of him, maybe in some ways, a little tougher, maybe a little more physical, but they've played him at guard and they kind of worked him into the lineup in Philly. So I would still say he's around 2 or 3 guy. But Ricky Stromberg, East-West Shrine guy, Arkansas, he feels like he's been there for a while. Kind of a little bit of a meat potatoes guy, but boy, I like him. I mean, I feel like you can get a value with him, and he may, I mean, I would say round 3, round 4, possibly round 5. I mean, somewhere in that round 4 range is where I think he'll end up going. And I would love that value there. Juice Scruggs, some people really like. I mean, I think he's okay. Olawatimi from Michigan is another one. I think he's a little stiff and a little short, but he's clearly got the desire to play the position. He just reminds me a little bit of Lloyd Cushenberry, who went to the Broncos and really hasn't panned out yet.
Yeah, I think he has the mind for it. I think technically he does everything right, but even at the Senior Bowl, he just seemed to get overwhelmed physically a lot in those one-on-one drills, which I think has to have you worried.
Tough for a shorter guy like that. It doesn't favor guys like that, in my opinion, unless they're just ox bull strong,
And by the way, I'm happy you said Whippler. I've called him Whippler for a year. This past week, I've heard 3 people call him Whipler, and I thought I had it wrong. So it is
pretty
Whippler.
Sure it's Whippler, but
no, so am I. No, I'm with you.
I could be wrong.
No, I'm with you. It's Whippler, 100%.
I get it in my head, and I just lock it in,
All right, pass rusher. I think you were ahead of the curve here, Eric. You had Miles Murphy dropping the 29 in your mock draft, and don't make the face.
No, I know. I like him, but I don't. Yeah, I wouldn't.
I've seen more and more of it though, and we were talking to Big Blue Kickoff Live. Fowler, he does who is it? No, it was Mickey Plyler, who does Clemson radio down there in South Carolina. And he was telling us that, look, their head coach Dabo Swinney never says a bad word about a player. He publicly kind of got on him a little bit this year for dogging it a little bit and not, finishing plays and such. And frankly, I watched the tape, and when I watched him, it was back in like November, and everyone's like, "Oh, top 10 pick," and I'm like, honest with you.
Yeah.
Where? Like, I don't see the burst. I don't see the explosive, bendy, fast guy. I see more of kind of a power guy, but not like an overwhelming power guy. So how is that a top 10 pick? Frankly, I think this is where he belongs, which doesn't mean he's a bad player.
Yeah.
I just don't see a top 10, top 15 guy, to be honest with you.
Yeah. That's what, when I asked somebody in the league about him, probably like around November, December, maybe, if I had to guess. And no, actually it was later than that. It was during bowl season. So it had to be December or January or something. And I said, kind of the same thing, like, top 15 just on athleticism. He said, have you watched him? And I said, yeah, probably 3-4 games. He said, did he ever dominate? And I said, well, no, he had a pretty good game against, Duke. And then he beat this team, and they say, yeah, I mean, that's the problem, is that, like, I don't know that anyone's gonna just go head over heels for him. If it works out where that the board shapes up and he's the guy and you're sitting at number 26, 8, 27, whatever, maybe he's your pick. But like you said, I felt like there wasn't that superpower to his game. He, like you said, he wants to be a little bit of he's a little bit of an in-betweener in terms of the power and the finesse but I mean, he looks beautiful, I mean, that just, like the height and the athleticism and everything, but he's not a big edge setter, in my opinion. He's not long for a guy that he doesn't have those, the raptor, kind of arms. So there's just I think he's going to be a little bit of a acquired taste in terms of how you use him. I think he's going to be a good player, but never a great one. Yeah,
look, I'm with you. I think he's going to be solid as a rock. I'm with you 100%. Yeah. Van Ness and Cansey, is that also kind of a flavor of the month type of thing, where it's going to have to fit what a team wants for them to draft those guys? Because, Van Ness, he seems like a bit of a tweener to me too, right? Like, he like, if this was 2012, I'd say he's a 3-4 defensive end. Those guys don't really exist anymore, right?
Yeah, right.
So I'm pretty sure he on passing situations he's a 3 technique, and I guess in run situations he's your end. I guess that's how you would probably play him, right?
I think so.
And then Cansey, I struggle with this tape, Eric, and I don't, why don't we start on Van Ness first, and then we'll jump to Cansey? Are people just going to fall in love with his frame and his raw athleticism and figure he's kind of just a bowling ball on tape. He kind of just goes straight really fast and he wins.
Yeah.
Is that what people are going to fall in love with and figure they can develop into something more?
Yeah, I think it's the quickness, the athletic traits. I really think that had he gone anywhere else in the country besides Pitt, where we're not going to be comparing to Aaron Donald, it would have actually done him a favor. It may have hurt his draft stock a little bit in a strange kind of way. What I'm basically trying to say is that if you go in thinking you're going to see Aaron Donald, or at least what Aaron Donald was his final year at Pitt, I think you're going to be a little bit disappointing. But then again, we're still talking about the the ACC Defensive Player of the Year. I mean, he's still made a lot of plays in the backfield. He to your point, he's a scheme specific guy. I mean, could a creative coach who isn't used to having that kind of guy find a way to use him? Of course, right? But he's going to be your gap slanting guy, the one gap only. I don't think he's got anywhere near the length or mass that you want to hold up blocks in two gaps. Then don't draft him, right? I mean, unless you're running that kind of a system, It's just pointless. So with Van Ness, you made a great point, which is that him kicking inside is probably what he does best right now. I mean, the quickness for the interior guards, he gave him some trouble. I think he's going to be like a little bit like George Karlaftis was for the Chiefs, where he plays and he's in a rotation and he helps out a good defense get better, or a average defense become good or whatever. But I don't know that he's going to be anywhere close to a finished product yet. You have to figure out, can he play on his feet? Does he have the bendiness to play the edge, or is he kind of your strong side guy? And yeah, I mean, I still think he's got a lot of talent. Shocked that, I mean, even though he led the D lineman in snaps, this is still starting thing. He's never started a game. Come on, but you get over that quickly.
Yeah, on Kancey, I think what gets me with him, and you mentioned the Aaron Donald comp, which to me is ridiculous, because the first thing I'll do with these guys, and I try to do more if I can find the time, I watch all their wins, right? So I'll go through every one of Kancey's pressures. I'll go through every one of Kancey's tackles for loss. And now this got me in trouble with Hutchinson last year, because all of Hutchinson's pressures and sacks were the same. He would go into the offensive tackle's kind of chest, win the hand battle, and he'd win that way. He didn't bend. It was kind of the same thing every time. And look, he developed into a lot more than that in Detroit. So take that with a grain of salt. But if you watch Kancey's wins, it's all quickness wins, right? It's a lot of swims, a lot of over moves, a lot of quick moves, to your point, slanting to the gaps. You watch Aaron Donald, I remember him playing against Zach Martin at the Senior Bowl. He would overpower people. He would big boy people. His, violent hands. And I don't see that type of play from Kancey necessarily that we saw from Donald. So to me, Kancey is right now primarily a guy that wins with his quickness, and I really do think he needs to develop more of his strength, especially if he wants to be an early down defensive tackle, because I'll tell you what, some of these 320-pound, grown men guards get their hands on him, it's over. Yeah, it's over.
That's if he doesn't win initially, whether it's by speed or some other way with his, if he doesn't win initially, you do see him stall. He'll even sometimes kind of duck his head, kind of lose the momentum. He stalls out. Now that's a stalemate, so it's not necessarily a loss if you could push the guy a little bit or get him off his spot. But still, I mean, I think there are some instances where you say to yourself, it's going to be tougher for him. I mean, Aaron Donald was so, freaky strong for his size. Like, I mean, not too many defensive linemen with a true six-pack at his age too now. That's like, well,
seriously, if you would just stand combine Aaron Donald next to Kalijah Kancey combine, it's like, it's not even in the same park.
It's different,
honestly, if you put him next to Adibare from Northwestern Aaron Donald, that's closer. Like, Adibari's at least rocked up a little bit.
Yes.
Kancey still has a lot of upper body development that he needs to do, in my opinion, at least.
I think you're right. Yeah, he's going to have to be a rotational guy at first, but he can add some juice to a unit on third downs, and hopefully you get a more rounded game from him. But I think he's top 50. I think he's at worst. If he doesn't go in round one, I still think he goes fairly early in round two.
Oh yeah, no, I'm with you. I think he's going to be a first round pick. Guys that can rush and win inside in the pass rusher are hard to find, and teams are going to draft those guys. Once you get past that first group, how big of a drop off is it for you, Eric, to the BJ Ojulari's, the Adebarares, who I just mentioned before, Northwestern, that kind of next group of guys that you can ask to get after the passer. And when would you be comfortable taking them in that kind of second round area? And who are some of your favorites?
Yeah, if you're looking for an interior pass rusher, Kancey's probably your only hope. If you're looking exterior, there's a lot more promise out there. Yeah, Tuipulotu, I think from USC, is being severely underrated. I'm not a huge Isaiah Foskey fan from Notre Dame. Like kind of what we talked about. The tape is he's traits, and you see the wins and you get excited, and then you see a lot of nothing for a while. I think he's going to be a developmental player who could be good in time. BJ Ojulari, though, with the bend and the quickness,
long arms too.
Long arms, yeah. I mean, he's interesting. And Adike Uzama from K-State, I kind of like a lot. He's a high motor guy. Derek Hall, same kind of way. The fascinating one,
Derek Hall's got some burst, by the way, dude. That dude has.
Who does?
Derek Hall. He's got some speed off the edge, man. Whoo!
I went to Missouri. You don't have to tell me about that. He gave us the business in the first quarter of that game, if I recall. So, yeah, Derek Hall, and he's a high character guy from what I can tell. And he's going to give you 100% effort all the time. He's just a little stiff. He's just not like a juicy edge rusher. But Will McDonald, however, is. And, he's not for everybody either. It's the Hassan Reddick body type and the slimmer Brian Burns body type. So some teams are going to love that, and he'll be in the first round picture for them. Other teams won't, and they probably won't end up drafting him.
All right. Give me some Eric Edholm specials here. Give me some guys you really like, any position, anyone you want to bring up. Things you're hearing.
Wow.
I'm going to leave. I'm going to do something that NFL.com does not have the guts to do. I'm going to give you an open floor and tell you to write about to say anything you want. And I'm going to listen to you about this draft. Go ahead. What do you got?
All right. I'm going to try to give you a bunch of little nuggets. Brian Burns. I don't know that. I mean, Brian Burns, I'm all messed up. Alabama. We just talked about him, the nickel guy.
Brian Branch.
I was saying, I had Brian Burns in my head. My God. I don't know that he goes round one. His workouts scared some people off. Jordan Battle, a little bit of concern with him as well. So those are two Bama guys who could go a little lower. Keep an eye on the Chargers for Bijan Robinson. They're a team that I wouldn't be shocked if they kind of make a move for him. I think teams feel okay about Tyree Wilson. The pass rush, obviously, it's going to go ahead of where the Giants are at. I think they feel a little bit better about the medical stuff. Dalton Kincaid, the tight end from Utah.
Love him.
Love him as a player. But as a receiver, he gives the effort as a blocker. Yeah, he tries, but let's be honest. But teams are anxious to see that workout that he's planning because he wasn't able to go with the pro day. He had, he'd hoped to be ready by then. It's a back, so it's a worrisome thing.
It was a fracture, wasn't it? Like a fracture, one of those little bones, right?
C6, C7, I want to say, yeah. So. Lot of buzz for Paris Johnson Jr. as tackle 1. Broderick Jones could end up being tackle 3. Most teams see Skoronski as a guard. Some tackle willing to try. Luke Musgrave, the tight end from Oregon State. Don't be shocked if he stays around until day 2. I know there was some top 25 talk for him, but I think when it's all said and done, he's going to have to wait a little bit here. Drew Sanders, too, the linebacker from Arkansas. There's some teams that are fascinated with him, but do you take him round 1? Is it a value position at that spot? I don't know.
Are they fascinated because of the middle linebacker play or because of the pass rush ability off
pass rush ability? Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I mean, you can use him. He's a 3-down linebacker, but yeah, obviously that pass rush ability is like the Saints had the kid from Ohio State, and I'm blanking on his name right now, who had a step right in and looked the part. He's got some similarities to him, but he's longer. I'm blanking on him right now. Number 30.
Oh, I know exactly who you're talking about. He just came out 2 years ago.
Too many names, man.
Names.
You know what I'm talking about. So just a few things that I've just sort of been talking to people about the last couple of days. I know there's a lot of information, but you told me to vomit it out.
No, I did. That was fantastic. Quick rapid fire, really fast.
Yeah.
Favorite mid-round running back. There's a million of them.
Roschon Johnson, Texas, Bijan's backup. Let's go. I like him a lot. I like, who am I forgetting? There's another good one there. I move on to the next one. I'll think about somebody else later. Yeah.
Okay. That's good. Give me your favorite guard in the draft where you're going to get value on that position.
Value's tricky because I was gonna say John Gaines, who had the big combine workout, but value. McClendon Curtis, the kid down in Mobile.
I like that.
I thought he looked pretty good, from Chattanooga. I mean, I thought he held his own. Anthony Bradford's his stock has really kind of risen. I think as teams have seen how thin guard is, Voorhees tore his ACL, Ekiyor from Alabama may go a little higher now, but Saldiveri. But I really think of those guys that Bradford's going to rise, and somebody like Curtis may get kind of lost in the shuffle a little bit.
First inside linebacker off the board.
Ooh, yeah, that's a good question. That's a tricky. Depends what I would say Sanders probably.
Okay.
But Campbell, Jack Campbell from Iowa, maybe, or
Trenton Simpson, or do you think people see him as a will and not a middle?
I haven't talked to anybody about Simpson lately but I think the athletic traits, he's more of like probably your will linebacker, if I had to guess. See, teams are kind of look at that position a little differently than they used to. So it's constantly having to kind of recalibrate. That's a good question, though. Diane Henley from Washington State's another one who could maybe surprise people.
Yeah, he's fast, man. He's good in coverage.
I'll go Sanders. I think someone's going to maybe take him a little higher than we expect.
All right, let's make believe Brian Branch is a slot corner. Who's the first safety that gets taken?
Ooh, good one. Yeah, assuming he's not because Jair Brown didn't work out the way we hoped. Antonio Johnson, probably.
Okay. People like him. People like him.
They do. Yeah, I think he's a good player. I don't know that he's a game changer. The only one who really kind of fascinates me to the point where I could, like Christopher Smith could be a good play. Caravon Merriweather, Maryland, I like a lot. Jason Taylor, the second from Oak State. But Jartavius Martin from Illinois, that's another name people might want to file away. He's a corner. He's a nickel. He's a safety. I would try him at outside corner, but he's played a lot at safety, so that may be his natural position. He had a really nice workout in Indy. He's one that may go a little bit higher than some people think.
All right, then I have to ask you, just because I have you, who's getting picked first overall?
My initial reaction when that trade went down, I tweeted it. I was like, I think it's Stroud. I just have a feeling, and that kind of felt like the buzz for a while. I try not to listen to all the daily updates because I know somewhere baked in there is a song or two that I don't need to know the lyrics of, So I'm going to stick with Stroud because I haven't heard anything concrete lately that says it's definitely Bryce Young, but they claim they're doing their work on him. They say that Josh McCown supposedly likes him better than Stroud. This is all different from what I'd heard before. So I'm willing to admit I don't always get, the pristine information on every prospect. I don't know. I think Stroud, but I'm not sure.
All right, then just stick on the quarterbacks. Last question.
Yeah.
Does anyone trade up for a quarterback? And if so, whom? I
think so. I don't know what the Colts are going to do. They are sitting there at 4.
Tough spot, man.
I think they hate that spot. They'd either rather be, 1 or 20th, right? And that's a tricky one. I wonder if Chris Ballard is just sitting back thinking of any way he can to not trade up and hope, they get the right result at 4. But that would be the first possibility. Levis, though, if he starts sliding a little bit, don't watch a team like
doesn't it?
Vikings, yeah, or if the Titans pass on him, if the Raiders pass on him, then all of a sudden he's going to go into a kind of a no man's zone there for a little bit.
So if not the Colts, who do you think would look up to go to 3, if anyone?
Maybe one of those teams I just mentioned, either Tennessee or I almost said Oakland, Las Vegas. I know it sounds crazy. People are like, did they just sign Jimmy Garoppolo? Yes.
The 1 year
deal. Essentially a 1 year deal. Hurt every single year. Like, love Jimmy, right? Does what you need to do, but always hurt. I'm sorry. I don't think you can count on him as to be your 17 game starter. I really think they're looking really hard. And I think Richardson has to fascinate him. I think Levis interests them. So keep an eye on the Raiders.
All right, Eric, tell the folks where they can find all your stuff.
NFL.com. It's the easiest website for any football fan. And remember, that's why I signed up for the team. And yeah, man, draft's closing in soon. It's hard to believe. This year's guy is flown by, actually.
Yeah, when this airs, we are going to be exactly 3 weeks out. So buckle up. It's coming fast, man. And
I'm
I think I'm getting to the point now where I haven't gotten to all the guys I want to yet. I'm closing in on 100, but I haven't gone, but at this point, you almost just want to just start seeing guys get picked. Like it's
I know. Yeah, if we could just get like a pick a day or something, just to get it going, right?
It's like one of those long-term fantasy football drafts where everyone drafts via email.
Email draft. Yeah,
exactly. Eric, good stuff, man. Always good to see you, brother.
All right, buddy. Good talking.
Another episode of the John Settle Podcast brought to you by PSEG. Thanks so much for joining us. For Eric Edholm, I am John Schmeelk. We'll see you next time, everybody.